Hello, hello, hello. This is Dennis. I'm going to discuss arrays or Array 101 in Java. So an array in Java is just like an array in most other programs, uh, but they have some differences. Um, so the first thing I like to do is take a look at this little class that I just made up like Apple, like, give the teacher an apple. So in this class Apple, I'm going to create an array. Now, if you remember, an array typically should have three parts. It should be the array, the size of the array, and the effective size of the array. The array is the elements that store the data. The size of the array is the total number of elements to store data, and the effective size would be of those total number of elements, how many you've actually placed something in or used. So the first thing I'm going to do is declare a variable called size and effective size, which I like to call eSize. I'm going to default eSize to 0, and it really doesn't matter if I default size or not, but I'll set that to 0 too. So the size is the total number of elements in the array, and the eSize is of those size elements, how many I've occupied by putting something into. Now, I'm going to create an array of integers, so let's call that my array. And hopefully you realize that this did not create an array of integers. As a matter of fact, it did not create an array at all. That would create a variable called myArray of type int, and that would make no sense. So in other languages, such as C, you might have declared your array something like that, possibly, or maybe like this, or maybe in C it was like that. One of the big differences between C arrays on the stack and arrays in Java, for example, would be that the array in Java, the size is variable. So in other words, it doesn't have to be a constant. And by the way, when you see something during this class written in all capital letters, that should be a constant. If you see something in this class starting with a lowercase letter, that more than likely will be a variable or a method. And if you see something starting with a capital letter, that should be a class name. All right, so this does not declare an array. Let's talk about what this does right here on line 13. That also does not declare an array, but what that does do is it defines an array reference variable. Now, even though line 13 is valid syntax, this is the way in Java you are meant to do this. You are meant in Java to put when you declare the square brackets, which makes it an array, go in front of the name of the array, not behind it. I believe the purpose of that would be create an integer array called myArray. Instead of creating an integer, myArray, so we put the square brackets first. So let's take a look at what happened on line 13. The question would be, did I create an array? And the answer is no, I didn't. On line 13, I created a reference variable that should later become an array. Let's make this reference variable, my array, actually become an array. And when I say become an array, I actually mean become an array object, because arrays are objects. How do I know that? Because I create the array using the keyword new. New, my array size elements. Sorry, I need data type. Okay, if I wake up today, there's the actual syntax. It's going to be new int array with size elements. So this would not be real useful because size elements would be 0. So we should pre-populate size before doing this statement. So let's show you how to do that. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, if I'm going to ask the user how many elements the array should have, is I'm going to do an SYSO, and here's the shortcut, never forget it. Hold down Control and hit space, 1, 2, 3, look what happens. it types out system.out.println for me. I'm going to get rid of the ln because I don't want a line return, and I'm going to create a prompt. Enter the size for the array, and notice I put a space after the colon because I like the where the user is going to type to be separated from that colon. Okay, so now I want to store size gets. Well, now there is no scan function or method that may have been inside of your C class, and there is no input function that might have been in your Python class. Java, when I want to get information from the keyboard, and let me rephrase this, one way to get information from the keyboard, not the way, is to use a scanner. Well, the scanner is a class in Java, and I'm going to create a scanner object. So to do that, SCANNER, so scanner is how I get input from this class. I can name this object that's going to allow me to use the methods in the scanner class anything I want. Typically, you're going to name it input. And the syntax is new. That's how I know it's an object. And it's going to be scanner. And the argument for scanner is system.in. No double space or no double quotes around it. So this line of code, which is very important, you'll use it most of the semester, creates a scanner object named input of type scanner, which is a predefined class, and it's used to get information in from the keyboard. So now I can use this input object by saying input dot. Notice I have lots of methods. I can input a hash code. I can input the next integer. And so on. So I'm going to just let you take a look at this. Notice Java is self-documenting. So here is the documentation that goes with each of these methods. So real common is going to be next int, next, let me scroll down here. Just plain old next. What next does is it returns a string up until they hit I believe enter, or space rather, and then you can do, I'll let you look at these, but next and next line are really important. Next float, next double, next boolean, next long. Next line does what I was trying to say, and it reads the entire line of text into, or entire line of text into a single string. All right, so I want to use this input here, input.nextInt. So that's going to retrieve an integer from the user and store it here in this size variable. So now when I create this array, it should have a size of whatever the user types. Let me run this. Enter the size of the array. Notice the prompt is right here. I say 150, and hopefully I now have an array with 150 elements. Now, one thing to note in Java is numeric data types for an array are always by default zeroed out. You don't have to initialize them to 0. Strings, I believe, have a space in it, so they're initialized. So are chars, and so on. So if you want to Google that, feel free, but Java initializes your arrays for you. So I have a counter on a clock on the screen telling me how long I've been going, so I notice it's about 9 minutes. I added this as part 1, which means I'm going to be ending this video soon and moving on to part 2 and continuing. Before I do that, I want to show you one thing. I want to show you how we could take this line and condense it into one. So I'll just do my array 2. I could say int my array 2, and now I want to call it an array. That's how I do it. Gets new int. So this is typically how we will declare an array. Instead of creating the reference variable and then creating the object for the array, we would create the reference variable and object all at one time. Okay, I'm not even going to summarize because I'm just going to say go to part 2 and we'll go from there. Okay, I lied to you. I'm going to do a summary. So here's my quick summary of this part 1 of Java 101 arrays. My summary says arrays have a size, which is the total number of elements of the array that we can store stuff in. The effective size, which I'm going to call E size, is a variable that represents the number of elements we have populated. Arrays obviously have elements where we store information. In Java, arrays have a variable size. And in Java, this is the syntax to create an integer array of size elements. See you in the next video.